Welcome to this video on modifying your Revit panel schedules. Here's what you can expect. For the purposes of this video, I assume you already have a general sense of how Revit panel schedules work and are interested in customizing your panel schedule templates. We'll go into a brief explanation of how to set and change which panel schedule template a particular piece of electrical equipment is using, a quick run-through of how to make and apply changes to a template, and a few customization examples. If you want more details about the commands and features available, there is a written companion piece to this video, which you can find in the description below, or by scrolling down if you're watching this from that article. If you want to follow along, I'm using Revit 2025 and the sample electrical project that comes with versions 2024 and newer. We'll be working with panel 404 in particular, which is on the L4 floor plan. We'll start by looking at how you set which panel schedule template your electrical equipment will use. If this is something you already know, you can use the video timestamps to skip to the next section. First, let's look at the family. To have a panel schedule and otherwise function as a panel, in the family category command, it needs to be set to electrical equipment. From there, we can specify a part type. Transformers and equipment switches do not get panel schedules. Switchboards and other panels get their own templates, which we'll look at a bit later. Panel boards get this additional panel configuration parameter to set how the circuit table will look for this equipment schedule. We'll go into more detail about these in a bit. Just know that this is where you determine which configuration your equipment will use. Going back to the project, we can set which panel schedule template the individual equipment uses by going to the panel schedule and running the change template command. Just select the template you want. We'll go with this auto shading template. Press OK, and we get this warning. Short version, if you've gone in and manually entered any information into this schedule that wasn't already in the template, and it isn't stored in a parameter, or if you changed any of the labeling text, that information will be lost. Just something to bear in mind when customizing your templates mid-project. You can turn this warning off if you like. We'll press yes, and the template will change. There are other uses for this command, and there are other ways to apply templates at the instance level, both of which we'll look at later. Another quick note, I picked the auto shading template, and now the load cells for these empty rows are grayed out where they weren't before. There's a setting for that in the templates, which we'll also go into. With that out of the way, let's just do a quick run-through of how to crack these templates open and how to apply the changes we make. Then we can get into some more detail. If we go to the Manage ribbon, there's a Panel Schedule Templates dropdown, which has the Manage Templates and Edit a Template commands. We'll start by looking at Manage Templates. We'll focus on this first tab for now. We'll get to the second one later. Up here, you can set which electrical equipment part type you're managing the templates for. Branch panel is for panel boards, data panel is for other panels, and switchboard is for switchboards. Next is that panel configuration setting we saw in the family. If you're not sure what these settings mean, the written article goes into that. You can see when we change either of these. The list of templates also changes. Finally, there are controls at the bottom to edit, copy, rename, or delete the selected template. As a side note, I strongly recommend making a copy before you do any customization. Revit does not store backups of these templates, so if you mess something up and save it, there's no easy way to undo that. If you run the Edit a Template command, which we will later, you basically get just these controls, so it's a bit leaner, a bit faster. So we'll select that auto shading template, press the Edit icon, And here is our template. We'll get into all this stuff in a moment, but for now, we can select this Supply From label, change it to Fed From, then press Finish Template to exit the editor. You'll notice this schedule has not changed. Revit does not update these in real time. You need to tell it when you want that to happen. If it's just the one panel and you're testing things out, you can run the Change Template command and press OK to update the schedule you're actively viewing. If you want to update it across every panel using that template, you can do that from the Manage Templates command. Over on the Apply Templates tab, you can use this to effectively run the Change Template command across multiple equipment at once, using the Control and Shift keys while selecting from the list. If we scroll to the bottom, there's an asterisk beside panel 404, indicating it's using a template that has since been updated. We'll select that and press the Update Schedules button to get the latest version of the template it's using. And when we press OK, that Supply From label changes to Fed From. So that technically answers the question, how do I modify my Revit panel schedules? Now we can go into a bit more detail about the kinds of changes you can make and how to do it. This will not be an exhaustive tutorial on every possible customization you can do. We'll just look at a few examples that you'll hopefully find applicable to some of your own ideas. For most of the commands on this ribbon, if you've ever spent time messing with spreadsheets, you have some idea how these work. We will spend a little time on the commands that are a bit more complex. If there's a command or feature you're curious about and I don't talk about it, check the companion piece for more details. We'll start on the far left with the Set Template Options command. Again, not going to detail everything here, just cover the basics. Also, the settings in this command differ depending on the template type and the panel configuration. That said, they all work in essentially the same way. The main thing is the branch panel type with a 2-column configuration has the most options, while the others have fewer options. The General Settings section is largely self-explanatory. The one setting I will point out is Number of Slots Shown. If this is fixed, it means it will always show this many circuits or taps, whether it's a 12-slot panel, 42-slot, 84-slot, whatever. If it's variable, the length of the circuit table will adjust automatically depending on the settings in each panel. Up next are the circuit table options. Couple things to point out, like these load formats. Revit does provide a handy preview so you can see what these options mean. And you can always press OK to see how it looks in your template, then undo it if you need. This toggle here, Display Multiple Rows for Multi-Phase Circuits. For most template types, it isn't available. This is only an option for single-column schedules, which typically means your switchboards and low-voltage panels. So if you're wondering why this is grayed out on most of your templates, that's why. The one underneath it is that auto shading setting I mentioned earlier. As you can see, it's enabled for this template. Moving along, last are the loads summary options. Header text orientation, pretty self-explanatory. This section here is a little like that number of slots setting earlier. This determines whether the loads summary displays all of the non-zero load types on that panel, or always displays the exact same load types for every panel. My recommendation is this first option, because it leaves out any load types you're not using and guarantees you will see every non-zero load type. If you go with the second option, it will show selected load types even if they're not on the panel, which some plan reviewers want. They like to see when it's zero. But it also means if, say, you have an elevator load on the panel, but that's not included in your template, then it won't show up in the summary and your numbers won't add up. Revit will warn you when this happens, but you may not always see that warning before things go out. So that's set template options. Let's move on to our first example. Before we start, let's talk about one of my favorite features, freeze rows and columns. When I move my cursor over these grid lines, you can see grips to resize them, which is helpful, but also means you might try to click a cell and accidentally resize the row or column instead without noticing. Enabling this deactivates those grips, so it's one less thing to worry about. Now, let's say you want to add a column to your circuit table. To do that, we'll select a cell in the table. I'm going to go with the trip column. Then go up here to Insert Column, and I'm going to insert to the left. As you can see, it will resize the adjacent column to make room. So you can unfreeze the grips to resize manually, or use Resize Column to set the width to specific values, which is what we'll do here. Revit is a little finicky with which columns it pushes and pulls during resizing, so this can take some practice. I'm actually going to start with the circuit description column and reduce that from 3 inches to 2.5 inches. Then I'll resize our new column to 1/2 inch, and that gets everything looking right. You'll notice the new column doesn't have any of the borders, and the heading text is not formatted the same way. So we need to get all that set up. Now, we can pick out a parameter for this column to display using the drop-down menus on the ribbon. For the circuit table itself, you can only add electrical circuits parameters. That is, parameters that exist on the circuit itself rather than on the equipment. Other parts of the schedule are the opposite. They can only show information on the equipment, not on the circuit. The header can also include project information, so things like the building and project name. We'll select length from the list, and you'll notice it went ahead and filled in the header for us, which is typical when setting parameters in the circuit table. So make sure you set the parameter before you label the header, because it will just overwrite that label. Next, because this is a unit-based parameter, we can run format units to set how it's displayed. This can be useful if, say, you don't want to show where it says VA in the load columns. In this instance, I want the length to round to the nearest foot, and press OK to save that. It doesn't change anything here, but we will notice the difference later. Next, we'll select this cell in the header, and instead of adding a parameter, we'll add a calculated value. If you've ever modified an equipment family so that a parameter is formula-driven, this is very similar. We'll set a name. You can also set a discipline and type, but we'll use the defaults. And here, you can specify the formula itself. You could, of course, enter equations, but the real power comes in being able to formulate based upon other parameters, which this lets you do without needing to create a separate parameter to track. Just as an example, we'll click this button to bring up the list of parameters and say number of phases plus the number of wires. Admittedly, not a useful example, but it works for showing this off. You can also use conditional statements here the way you would in families. For example, some folks like to display the MCB rating when there is an MCB, But if it's MLO, they'll display the bus size instead. Now, Revit doesn't offer the right parameters to set that up, but you might be able to figure something out using custom parameters. Alternatively, if you use our electrical add-in, ElectroBIM, we have step-by-step instructions on how you can do it using our parameters. The link to that is in the companion piece. We'll press OK to insert this formula. And so we will remember to look for this later. We'll put a label over here to say this cell should equal 7. At least for the panel we're looking at. Finally, we'll select the circuit description column and look at how you can combine parameters. Again, this might look familiar depending on your level of Revit expertise. It's essentially the same as setting up annotation tag families to display parameters. In this case, let's say you want to include the schedule circuit notes before your load name, so you can have a short note for special circuits that will only be visible on the schedule. We'll just use a space separator so it looks cleaner on circuits without notes. Remove the separator after load name, and press OK. Just to flesh this out, we'll add a couple notes here under Legend, such as A for AFCI and G for GFCI. Now to see these changes in our project, we'll press Finish Template, then run Change Template to view the changes. And here you can see the new column we added, which shows the length rounded to the nearest foot. You can also see our calculated value up here, 7 as promised. And finally, if we select this circuit and add a circuit schedule note, it appears in the circuit description. And there you have it, a short demonstration of how you can customize your panel schedule templates in Revit. If you have any comments or questions about this video or the written supplement, feel free to let us know. Take care. Unlock the full potential of your Revit electrical designs with ElectroBIM. This essential Revit add-in enhances your workflow by offering features like single-line diagrams that link to the model, accurate voltage drop calculations, fault and arc flash, and more. Visit the Design Master website to learn more about ElectroBIM.